Good afternoon and welcome to Books and Books. My name is Ketsia and I work in the children's department here. You're all in for a great treat for today, and we have events like this almost every single day. So by our counter, we have our monthly calendar. Please pick one up before you leave today. Also, if you would like to keep up with our events through email, you can either join us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and also you can go on our website, and on the left-hand side, we have a place to place your email as well. So also, for those of you who are watching and tuning in, thanks for tuning in. If you'd like a signed copy of this book, Benjamin Franklin, Huge Pain in My, Use Your Imagination, by Mr. Adam Mansbach and Alan Zweibel, please give us a call and the number on the screen below. Now for today, I am passing on my introduction baton to Mr. Dave Barry. So let's give a loud welcome to Mr. Barry, our fearless author.
Thanks, Ketsia. Okay, I'll bring them up. I guess I'll bring you up one at a time. We'll start with Adam Mansbach. He wrote a book, and I'll tell. Yes, come on, Adam Mansbach, ladies and gentlemen, who wrote. He wrote a book. Everyone in this room has seen the book. I can't actually tell you the name of the book. But it was a children's book that really wasn't written for children. Go the F to Sleep. It was this gigantic hit book, extremely funny. And everybody who read, every author I know had the same reaction, which is, why did I not think of that? Every parent, but anyway. But he's had a lot of other books. He's written, I'm just going to tell you some of his novels, which have been critically acclaimed. Rage in Black, The End of the Jews, Angry Black White Boy. He's won a bunch of awards. He's been a visiting writer and professor of literature at Rutgers at Camden. He's been you still are a screenwriter, are you not? Yeah, he's still working on screenwriting. I'm not going to go through all of his credits because that would take us the rest of the day. His work has appeared in the New Yorker and the New York Times, which are both publications. He published in the 90s a hip hop journal called Elementary. Is that not right? Which I did not know about him until I was looking him up to do this. And you toured as a drum technician? I did. Okay. So the guy has done a lot of things, but most recently, and he wrote a book with my good friend, Alan Zweibel. Please bring Alan Zweibel. Alan is a male underwear model. No, I'm kidding. Female. He's a female underwear model, and he doesn't get a lot of work, so that's why he's been writing books. Alan was born in Brooklyn and went to college, but nobody knows why, because he almost immediately started writing jokes, starting writing jokes for Catskill comedians for $7 a joke. He ended up, I'll let him tell the story of how, because it's kind of a funny story, ended up on Saturday Night Live as one of the original writers there. Helped create, among other characters, Rosanna Dana. Was a very close friend of Gilda Radner. He has done a number of other things in television. He produced the Gary Shandling show. He co-wrote, was it Fame Becomes Me, right?
Fame Becomes Me was Martin Short's Broadway show.
Martin Short, right. He's collaborated with Billy Crystal on 700 Sundays, which won a Tony, I believe. He's won a whole bunch. I'm not going to, again, go through all the things he's done. Most recently, he's been active on Curb Your Enthusiasm with Larry David. His books include Bunny Bunny, which is about Gilda Radner, The Other Schulman, which won the Thurber Prize, Our Tree Named Steve, which is a wonderful children's book. And with me, he wrote a book about two soccer dads called Lunatics. So without further ado, I'm gonna go over and can I sit with you guys? I'm supposed to sit with
No.
you? That's what
No,
I said.
just over there.
Stay behind your
This
phone.
is fine.
I'll stay over here behind the lectern.
Yeah, right.
Let me start. I will. I'm going to stay over here.
Now, what are you doing all the way over there? Come on over.
Yeah.
Now, how did you guys? You come from very disparate backgrounds. How did you end up working together on this book? Well, I should name the book that we're talking about.
Yeah.
Again, they have a way of coming up with books. You can't say all the
Is there a
words in the
copy of it
name.
anyway?
But this one is called Benjamin Franklin, Huge Pain in my ass. Can we say that here? I guess we can.
Too late.
Too late, yeah. So, yeah, how?
2 years ago, I was giving a speech at the Tucson Book Festival, and there was an author at every table, and I was looking to see who was there, and I saw that Adam was there, and coincidentally, that week, one of my daughters had sent me the link to go to sleep, and the audio version was Samuel L. Jackson, which is really hilarious. So I sought him out, and we got to talking, and sort of hit it off, and decided we would try to write something together.
Yeah, that is an accurate description of what happened. Before I have to get rid of this because I had a very bad experience once speaking on a panel where they miscalculated the number of chairs. And what happens when there's too many chairs on stage often is that somebody decides that they should come up and fill the vacant chair. This happened to me once in Minnesota, and this woman stood up in the audience, and she had an infant. She had like a 4-month-old baby. And she said, "You know what I don't see on this panel? I don't see me." And she like turned to the audience for support, and everyone was like, And she walked up there with the baby and sat down. And then we had to like endure her lovely presence. And the thing is, I viewed her as the enemy, so my goal was to not let her talk at all. But a guy on the panel with me went over and like started cuddling the baby and like coochie-cooing the baby. He totally sold us out. So anyway, I moved the chair so that.
That's one of the saddest stories I've ever heard. I don't know if I can go on with this.
Yeah, it was terrible. No, so yeah, Alan and I met in Tucson and hit it off. And you often say things to people like, "Hey, man, we should work together," after a drink or two. And you don't usually mean it, but Alan and I actually followed up and decided to work together. We live on opposite sides of the country, so very quickly we decided that some kind of exchange of letters would be a good form for the book and actually replicate the way that we would write the book. And from there, obviously, the only logical thing was a situation where Ben Franklin was trading letters through time with a 13-year-old in Philadelphia in the present. Any of you would have come to the same conclusion. So that's the book.
Let's talk about that a little bit more, the premise of the book. The kid is, his name
Can I
is...
borrow your copy just so I can hold it up? I'll give it back to you, I swear.
Right. And if I can borrow your...
If you want, you can have my watch just to make sure that you'll get it back. Okay, here you go. Yeah, just to show you. All right.
Is it a Rolex?
It's not a Rolex.
Oh, I don't know.
Oh, shit. Okay. All right. This is the book, Benjamin Franklin, A Huge Pain in My, and you guys fill in the blank. Where were we?
I was going to ask you to talk a little bit more about the premise of the book. There's a boy in the book, the protagonist, we call him in professional journalism.
The protagonist is a 13-year-old boy. His name is Franklin. His parents named him that after Benjamin Franklin, this great American icon, thinking that he would grow up similarly. It ends up, his life is nothing like it. He's sort of an outsider. He just got to middle school. He's not with the cool kids. He's got an unrequited crush on a girl. He's not getting good grades, not getting along with his stepfather. And one day the history teacher has the kids write a letter to a historical character. And he writes a letter to Benjamin Franklin telling him how lousy his name is working out for him. And he gets angry at his stepfather at one point, and to get back at him, what he does is he steals a stamp, a vintage stamp from his collection, actually mails the letter. Cut to 1776, Benjamin Franklin comes waddling out of his house to his mailbox, and in it is a letter from this kid from 2015. And Benjamin Franklin, coincidentally, takes a liking to the kid because coincidentally he is having the same social problems with the other founding fathers that this kid is having with his peers. So a grandfather-grandson relationship forms through these letters. I got that right? That's what we wrote.
Fairly
Yeah,
accurate,
okay.
yeah. And we divided the labor very simply. I wrote the kids' letters because I'm essentially a 13-year-old, and Alan wrote Ben's letters because he and Franklin actually went to elementary school together.
You've said that before. He was actually about 3 or 4 grades ahead of me, so don't make it like we were total contemporaries. I take a little offense at that. This is the book.
So now, you've written a children's book, and you've written. Do you view this? Do you view this as a children's book? How what do you see as your
Right.
Your audience.
Well, you know, it's interesting. Alan and I didn't set out to write with any particular audience in mind or to fit the book into a particular genre. In fact, the book is called a middle grades book, which is a little bit younger than young adult, which is a term neither one of us knew at the outset. And Alan continues to call the book a middle ages book whenever possible.
I looked at my driver's license and I went, middle ages, yeah.
Yeah. But, you know, by virtue of having a young protagonist and the sensibility of the book, you know, when we went out to sell it, we thought at that point that it was a young adult book, and we were told by the various publishers who were interested in the book that it was a middle grades book, which was, I think, strategic in some ways on their part. They claim, number one, they claim that it was a boy book, which is offensive to me on a number of levels. But also that in the young adult realm, boy books only sold if they had like wizards and swordplay and shit in them. Sorry, pardon me. Wizards and swordplay and dragons in them. And so therefore, because this was more of a comedic book, it should be slotted down into middle grades, which meant we had to make some adjustments in terms of the material that was in the book, take out some of the more risque elements so that it would work.
Such as?
Well, I mean, there's a big set piece in the book which involves Ike. He goes by Ike in the book.
The kid is Ike,
Franklin.
yeah.
So Ike sneaks out of his house to rendezvous with his girlfriend or his crush, Claire, on a playground and a bunch of other kids, which is something I did a lot when I was in 7th grade. Like, I never exited my house through the door. It could be noon, and I would still, like, sneak out the window, you know? And what they do is they all meet up, and in the original chapter, they're all drinking, like, you know, jungle juice, which is, are you familiar with jungle juice? No, they have it at the cafe outside, I think. It's when you mix up a bunch of different liquor, basically to avoid detection, so that instead of your parents' vodka bottle being half empty, their vodka, gin, triple sec, tequila bottles just make, you know. So we had this scene where Ike, you taking notes? Everybody's taking notes? And get a piece of chalk, because if they use chalk to, anyway. So we had this scene where Ike, you know, drinks a bunch of liquor and ends up like throwing up in an inopportune fashion. Not that there's ever like an opportune fashion really to throw up. And so this turned out to be inappropriate, even though the message clearly was that drinking is bad and can make you throw up. So we had to get rid of the alcohol, which left us with this scene, which we both really liked, but which didn't make any sense now. And eventually what we did is, instead of having him steal booze from his parents, he steals a 6-pack of what he doesn't realize is non-alcoholic beer. And this, in turn, causes him to throw up, which is even more embarrassing because it doesn't actually contain alcohol. So we had workarounds like that.
Did you do a tremendous amount of historical research about Benjamin Franklin in the course of writing this book?
I know more about this guy than anyone should, all right?
And yet less than anyone else who's ever written a book about it.
I mean, I knew about flying the kite, all right? That I had down pretty good, okay? The rocking chair, oh yeah, I think I knew that. I thought maybe it was Jefferson, but it was him. All right, the lightning rod, okay. The urinary catheter?
Rod.
The lightning rod.
It was a key. It was attached to the kite, moron.
Oh, you know something? Yes, obviously.
Did you go to like Wikipedia? You didn't even go to Wikipedia, did you?
I went to Wikipedia, but I got distracted by other stuff on Wikipedia, okay? And I didn't know the urinary catheter.
What?
Yeah. Go on Wikipedia. No. You'll see a urinary catheter. It's not attached to him. You won't get embarrassed. It's just a picture of a urinary catheter. Swim fins. Right. That's the first time, by the way, that swim fins and urinary catheter was ever been in the same sentence. Okay.
You're just making stuff up now.
No.
You're saying Benjamin Franklin invented swim fins.
Swim fins.
You might think you're making stuff up, but it will turn out that in fact he invented whatever you just said.
Chances are. You know? Yeah. The folding.
Xerox copier.
Yeah, the folding chair. I mean, he did everything.
Okay. He was a very industrious guy.
And he was a handsome man too. I don't know if you've seen him.
Now, in the course of writing, when I wrote a book with Alan, there were times we did a similar process. I had a character, he had a character. Send him a chapter, he sent me a chapter, that kind of thing. Right. And there were times when we would have creative differences. Like at one point, I had to write Alan an email pointing out that he had just killed all the main characters. And we were about, 10% into the book.
Yeah.
Dave thought this was a big deal, okay? He thought it was a big deal that the 5 main characters, they jumped off a cruise ship into the ocean.
And
they're
died.
now dead,
Yeah.
and there was nobody left to carry on the other 90% of the book.
And yet there was still a contract to write a whole book.
Yeah.
But anyway, so my question is, which I'm trying to get out of here, Val, and we'll just shut up for a minute.
Okay.
Is did you have any of that kind of plot dispute? I mean,
I don't recall Alan trying to kill off any characters. We didn't. I chose to avoid having any conflict with Alan by minimizing any communication with him at all. So we just exchanged chapters.
I spent a lot of time alone, as you can see.
There was really no communication outside of this exchange of chapters for at least half of the book. We just took cues from each other, played off of each other. And then at one point, it came to me suddenly that we needed a plot in this thing. So
Same problem.
we never came to that point.
Yeah.
We're
So
still working on the plot.
so I called 411. I got Alan's phone number, and we had one of maybe a half dozen editorial conversations. I can't. Did we have disagree about anything?
No, what we had were discussions about historical facts, like
Like whether we should use any.
Yeah, well, if we wanted to be historically accurate.
Right.
And what we did was we said, no, that's for chumps.
Right. I mean, the book is, in many ways, what this book really is kind of like an ongoing fight between facts and jokes, and the jokes win a decisive victory.
But the people who have been reading the book thus far, both kids and adults, there is a relationship here, there is a plot, and there is, aside from the comedy of it, there is an emotional tug because there's a grandfather-grandson relationship that ensues. And this is the first of 3 books in a series about these 2 characters, and that's only going to develop even more so over the next
Have you written the next one? Or
The next one is almost done. Yeah.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Amazingly. And at our first gig maybe Dave, I don't know if you guys are doing a sequel to Lunatics, or whether when you were on tour with Alan, he gave away the entire book ever. Because at our first gig in Pasadena, Alan announced not only the entire plot of the first book, but the plot of the subsequent books, which we haven't even written yet.
Are they also going to involve Abraham Lincoln, or just the concept of time-traveling mail?
They're going to stick with Franklin.
Okay.
With Franklin,
Yeah.
yeah. Because the guy was fat, and he had stringy hair, and he invented the urinary catheter. I think there's a lot more to mine here, don't you?
Yeah. The second
We've
book
only
is actually,
scratched the surface.
It's kind of what kids are looking up to,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The kids want to know about
They
a
want
guy
to know
like
more
this.
about a guy like that. Yeah.
Yeah, there's nothing hotter with the junior high set than urinary catheters.
Yeah. So if I could just back now that we've talked a little bit about the book, I want to talk about you guys a little bit.
I'll get my watch back then?
No, she gets to keep
Oh,
it
okay,
on.
gets to keep it up. Because I have a lot of these at home. All right. Only got one watch.
I'm going to start with you, Alan. Tell us, because I love this story. I don't know if anybody else will love it. Just how you actually ended up being a writer for Saturday Night Live.
Well, this was, being a comedy writer in general wasn't even my idea. It was a decision that was made for me about 40 years ago by every law school in the United States. I went to the University of Buffalo in late 60s, early 70s, and I did well with my grades, but I had to take the law boards. And I don't know how they grade them now, but back then it was from 200 to 800. If you can write your name, you got a 200. If you were Einstein, you got an 800. And if you were Alan Zweibel, you got a 390, which was basically vegetable mentality. And I went home and I told my Long Island Jewish parents I got a 390 on the law boards. And about a week later, this is after they uncovered the mirrors, my father gave me $1,000, which I then gave to a guy named Stanley Kaplan. Is he down here too? For those of you who don't know, Stanley Kaplan's got these schools all over the country where they teach you how to take standardized tests. So I gave him $1,000 because I wanted to retake the law boards, and I studied really hard for 6 months, and I retook the test, and my score catapulted up to a 401. So I figured at that rate I'd be around 90 before I got into an English-speaking law school. So I started writing jokes for comedians who worked in the Catskill Mountains. $7 a joke. That's how much they would pay me. Do you want to hear a $7 joke?
Got a $7 joke?
I was 21 years old, and these guys were 45 and 50. And I had a guy named Freddie Roman, who's a very nice commercial comedian. He was about 50 at the time. He said, Alan, you know, sperm banks are in the news. And I didn't know this. I was 21. It wasn't like at the fore of my consciousness. So he said, give me some sperm bank jokes. So the first joke I ever wrote that I got paid $7 for, I'd written a joke saying that they now have sperm banks, which is just like an ordinary bank, except here, after you make a deposit, you lose interest, okay? Hey, $7, what do you want, okay? So then the word started spreading through the Catskills, is this sperm bank guy, you know? So, okay, fine, another sperm bank joke. I looked into the future because they were starting to freeze sperm. And I said that could be a problem in the future because it's hard enough telling a kid he's been adopted. How do you tell him he's been defrosted? Okay, another $7. So to supplement this great living I was making, I lived back with my parents after college, and I took a job in a delicatessen in Queens, New York, and my price slowly went to $10, $12. The highest I ever got for one joke was $18. I got high for a joke about a Hasidic orgy where the men were on one side of the room and the women were on the other. These were all like nondescript comedians, okay, with no persona, individual persona. They all wore tuxedos and looked very nice, but there was no nuance to them. Years later, when I wrote for a guy like, let's say, Rodney Dangerfield, he had that thing, I don't get no respect, so it was easy to have him say, I never got any respect. Even as an infant, my mother wouldn't breastfeed me. She said she liked me as a friend. Okay, that was a lot easier to do. I'm going nowhere fast with these jokes, okay? So there were two clubs in New York, one called The Improvisation, one called Catch a Rising Star, and these were the new breeding grounds for comedians. This is where Richard Pryor and David Steinberg and Robert Klein and Lily Tomlin and Bette Midler were coming through. My friend Larry David started there. And I figured my plan was to make jokes, go on stage, write the jokes, go on stage and say the jokes that all these comedians wouldn't buy from me. And I became fast friends with a guy who was just starting out at the time also, whose name was Billy Crystal. He lived about 3 towns over from me on Long Island, so he used to pick me up every night. We would drive into the city, tell our jokes, and then we'd drive back, listen to the cassettes to critique each other. So I'm about 4 months into this experiment of mine, because the plan was to go on stage and maybe a manager or an agent would see me and help me get a job writing TV, which is what I wanted to do. About 4 months into this experiment, it's about 1 o'clock in the morning, and I'm having the hardest time in the world making these 6 drunks from Des Moines laugh. I get off the stage, I go to the bar, I'm sweating like a pig, I'm waiting for Billy to be done so I can get my ride back, and a guy comes over and he sits next to me and he just starts staring at me, and I go, what? He goes, you know, you're the worst comedian I've ever seen in my life. And I said, thank you, I really need to hear this right now, this is really great. He says, but your material isn't bad, did you write it? And I said, yes. He said, can I see more of it? I said, you bet. And I didn't even ask who this was. At this point, I would have shown it to like a gardener, you know. It ends up, this is Lorne Michaels. And he's going from club to club looking for writers and actors for this brand new show that would premiere in the fall called Saturday Night Live. So I go back to my parents' house in Long Island. I stay up at my mom's kitchen table 2 days straight, typing up what I believe were 1,100 of my best jokes. 1,100, I had a book this big with jokes in it. Then I have to go back into the city for my meeting with Lorne Michaels. I remember I was nervous, I didn't even know what to wear, so I'm saying to myself, young hip producer, young hip show. Okay, I'll dress young, I'll dress hip. I put on my father's maroon polyester leisure suit, okay? I looked like a big blood clot, okay, sitting on Long Island Railroad, going into the city. Lorne was staying at the Plaza, and I didn't want to be late. It was a 2 o'clock meeting, so I got there around 7 in the morning. And this is 1975. There's no cell phones. I went to a payphone, and I called Billy Crystal, who had been having a lot of discussions with Lorne about this new show. There was even some talk that Billy would be one of the actors on this new show. So I said, listen, I'm going to have a meeting with this guy, Lorne. Is there anything you can tell me to give me a leg up in this interview? He said, well, he used to write for Woody Allen. He produced some Monty Python specials. Oh, and he hates mimes. Lorne hates mimes. I go, gotcha. So I go upstairs, 2 o'clock, I sit on the bed, he pulls up a chair, and I hand him this tome, okay, of 1,100 jokes. He opens the book, he reads the first joke, and he goes, uh-huh. Then he closes the book. I'm up for 2 days straight typing, you know, with the typewriter keys, and they catch, and there's some ink on your fingers and everything, ribbons and stuff. He reads one joke, and to show you how long ago this was from the reference points in the joke, I had written a joke saying that the post office was about to issue a stamp commemorating prostitution in the United States. It's a 10-cent stamp. If you want to lick it, it's a quarter, okay? So he said, good, very good. He said, how much money do you need to live on? I said, well, I'm making $2.75 an hour at the deli. Match it, you know? So he said, well, tell me more about yourself, which I took to mean that before he committed to this kind of cash, he wanted to see what he was buying, you know? I said, well, Woody Allen's my idol. I love Monty Python. But if there's one frickin' mime on this show, I am out of here. And he gave me a job. So that's how I got to Saturday Night Live.
So, Adam, you had, what happened to you is what every author dreams will happen, which is you had a book that became the #1 New York Times best-selling book, not just for a little while. It was a huge, huge, huge book. You had already had quite a bit of success at that point, you know, far beyond what most writers have. But that was a whole different level. How'd that affect you and your family, and you know, what changed as a result of that?
Wow. Yeah. You know, pretty much everything. The story of the book is a weird one because, so my daughter Vivian was 2.5 at the time. My beautiful, wonderful daughter Vivian. But sleeping was not high on her list of priorities. So I would often be in her bedroom for like 2 hours, 2.5 hours, trying to get the kid to go to sleep. And on one hand, it's lovely to be in a room, you know, quietly trying to soothe the person you love most in the world. On the other hand, you would, at a certain point, do almost anything to get out of that bedroom. Like, if Don Corleone walked in the room and was like, I'll put the kid to sleep, but you may have to do me a service one day, and that day may never... You're like, whatever, Don Corleone, just take this baby. So I sat down and I wrote this book, and, you know, it was sort of my attempt to infuse a traditional bedtime story with all the, like, snoozy puppies and bunnies and kittens, with the honest parental monologue going on at the time. And, you know, unlike almost anything else I'd ever written, I didn't really have any ambitions for it. Like, I didn't think it was publishable. I just thought it was funny, and I would read it to my family, and they would laugh, and we would all move on with our lives. But they laughed a lot. So it began to dawn on me that possibly this was something that could be published. And I sent it to just one editor, a guy at a house called Akashic Books, small New York house. Their motto is reverse gentrification of the literary world. So you can tell how, like, ambitious and, you know, predatory and capitalist they are. But I knew that Johnny had a couple of young kids who didn't sleep. He told me that his kids were the kind who only slept in the car. So he would, on a nightly basis, drive through at least 3 boroughs of New York City trying to get these kids to go to sleep, which is more common than you might think. Now, since this book has been published, I hear everybody's stories about how they put their kids to sleep. And this one woman told me that she also had to drive her kids to get them to go to sleep. But she didn't like want to go far, so she just drove around her block over and over, and her right tires wore out. You know? So anyway, I send the manuscript and a couple of sample illustrations that a friend of mine did to Johnny Temple at Akashic, and for a couple of months, we're both sort of on the fence. He thinks it's really funny, his wife thinks it's great, but neither of us think there's necessarily an audience. We just think that we're probably bad parents for liking this. You know, so, and you know, we sort of talk about it. He's like, I don't know, man. I don't know if I should publish this. And I'm like, I don't know either, Johnny. Probably a bad idea. But, you know, we keep thinking about it. And he, at one point, walks the book over to his local bookstore because we were flummoxed by things as simple as, like, where would you shelve this book? So he brought, you know, because we were pretty sure the children's section was not appropriate. He walks it in, and he asks them if they like it and whether they'd stock it and where they would shelve it. And they're like, yeah, we love it. We'd put it right up front. Great, great, great. But like eventually you'd have to stock it somewhere. Where would you stock it? And they look at him and say, the parenting section. And Johnny calls me and he's like, you'll never guess. There's a parenting section. confirming our earlier thesis that maybe we're just, bad parents. So Johnny decides that he's going to publish the book. And the book is slated to come out in October of 2011. But 6 months before that, in April, the day after my daughter's 3rd birthday, I give a public reading of the book for the first time at a museum in Philadelphia as part of an evening of like 10-minute performances. And I'm last. There's like 50 people before me. And right before me, second to last, is a 93-year-old tap dancer. Like, this is not hyperbole. She was really 93. She had a fringe skirt on. She came up with the U.B. Blake Orchestra. U.B. Blake was only 1 year behind Alan and Ben Franklin in school. He died in like 1982.
Good guy. Really nice kid. Yeah, I remember.
And you never want to follow a 93-year-old, not on stage, not on the highway, like not at all, So I come on after her and I read the book, and there's a nice response from the maybe 150 people there, which bodes well, but I don't think anything of it, and I go to sleep. And when I wake up the next morning, the book's Amazon ranking, and the book's Amazon page has just gone up. The book is 125th on Amazon, which, as a literary writer, I didn't even know there were numbers that low. Like, if you crack 5 figures on Amazon, it's a good day usually. And by the end of the week, the book had shot up to #1 on Amazon. Now, I don't want to get overly technical here, but the book did not exist. It hadn't even gone off to the printer yet. It was 6 months out. So we had this book that was a hit, but it didn't exist, And it stayed at #1. And we started rushing it forward, trying to get it out in time for Father's Day in June. Meanwhile, a week after that, it's still at #1, and all this media, people are calling me. I'm getting offers to do interviews, and I have a gag order. I'm not allowed to say anything, which is terrifying, because as a literary novelist, again, you're desperate for any kind of attention you can get. And now I was like pushing back and like, tell the Today Show to screw themselves, So a PDF of the book, which we had put together to send booksellers because we thought it might be an uphill battle to get them to stock a book called Go to F to Sleep, this PDF leaked and suddenly was ricocheting all over the internet. So everybody was getting it for free. It landed in hundreds of thousands of people's inboxes. Maybe some of you saw the book that way for the first time. Did anybody see the book that way for the first time? A couple people did, and a bunch of liars. Okay. And we thought we were dead in the water because, like, hey, Mitchell, nobody was going to buy the book if the book was widely available for the price of free $99. So I started, like, identifying where it was leaking and writing. Like, there was a woman in Australia who put the whole book up as a Facebook album. So I wrote her this nice note and was like, hey, look, I'm glad you like the book, but we're trying to sell some copies. Would you mind removing that? And she wrote me back and said, I'm happy to remove it if you want, but I want you to know that 700 people in the last 24 hours have asked me where they can get the book, and I'm sending them to Amazon. And I was like, cool, forget it. And luckily for us, it's bad form in this country to show up at a baby shower with a low-resolution, printed out, stapled together, thing that you print off the internet and be like, here, it's such a wonderful time in your life. So we weathered that. We got the book out in time for Father's Day. Sam Jackson did the audio book, probably his best work since Pulp Fiction, and and like crazy things just kept happening. The book started, debuted at #1 on the Times list, and the next thing that happened was a censorship battle. Not here, but in New Zealand, which is odd, right? Like you would think that New Zealand, would be fairly liberal in these matters, but there was a group called.
Why?
Why would you think that?
Why would I think New Zealand is liberal in these matters?
Can you please explain New Zealand to Alan?
Notoriously liberal in these matters.
Thank you.
Oh.
Thank you, Dave.
There's still much I can learn from you, yeah.
Notoriously. But the Family First New Zealand group, the press release that they put out trying to get bookstores to pull the book from their shelves. I have it framed in my office now. It said, while this book may be harmless and even humorous in the hands of normal, well-adjusted adults, it could pose a real danger to children in the hands of aggressive, dysfunctional parents. The same, of course, could be said of a spoon. So, luckily the audiobook in New Zealand and Australia was read by this woman named Noni Hazelhurst, who's like like a serious film actress and also a children's television presenter. She's like Mr. Rogers and Meryl Streep at the same time. Again, that's how Australia and New Zealand work, Alan. Dave?
I got to tell you, I'm sitting here racking my brain trying to figure out what F means in that title. So I haven't.
Okay, yeah.
Maybe
so,
I'm naive.
She debated the Family First New Zealand president, who I think was also like the secretary and the sergeant at arms and the membership, and basically told him to shut up, and he did, and he went away. So like, the thing just kept rolling. And meanwhile, it was very weird for me because I was suddenly being sort of viewed as a parenting expert in some corners, which is counterintuitive, right? And I was getting a lot of mail and email, and I was getting people thanking me for saving their marriages, and I was getting emails from like therapists telling me that they gave the book to their young clients who were freaked out about parenthood. But I was also getting these irate emails from people who were like, "This is an outrage. I would never read this book to a child." Which like, fair enough, like. But like, I still can't understand the blend of like literacy and illiteracy that would lead you to mistakenly read a book called "Go the F to Sleep" to a child. It even says on the back of the book, you probably should not read this book to a child. So it was a strange time, and I had all kinds of wacky adventures that we can talk about more later.
Wow. Well, I just realized that we burned through a bunch of time, so I thought we.
I wouldn't know because I don't have a watch.
But no, does anybody have any questions for Alan or Adam? Yes.
Like, how did you actually work together as writers? Like, how did you actually come up with the concept? Is one person like throws something out, and the other person's like, "Oh, that's interesting, but if we did this," and like you guys are like, "Oh yeah," or I mean, like, how does it really work?
That's far too much discussion for us. We didn't even go that far with it. We arbitrarily came up with two people, and we did different pairs of people. And like we said at the outset, he lives in Berkeley, I live in New Jersey, so we figured it would be a correspondence of some sort. We weren't going to be in the same room. And we said, okay, who should be writing letters? And we did different pairs of people. And once we decided it would be a 13-year-old kid and a historical character, in this case, Benjamin Franklin, he became the kid. I became Ben Franklin, and the games began. So there was not really a blueprint. Did we have any idea where we were going?
No, none at all. We're done, and I still don't know if the book makes any sense.
Yeah.
But the funny thing too is that Alan and I only met in person the one time in Tucson, decided to work together, and then never laid eyes on each other again until the book was finished. So it was a funny thing of learning to work with somebody, but also getting to know somebody weirdly through these proxy personalities in a way. It's like I got to know Alan by being a 13-year-old writing to Ben Franklin. It's sort of a weird process.
And I had to capture Benjamin Franklin in order to write authentically like him. So I read autobiography of Benjamin Franklin. I lied. I bought the book. I skimmed maybe about 3-4 pages, and I think, oh yeah, I can nail this guy really good. And but and we didn't see each other, like you said, until a year later after the book was already done, and we had a delicious lunch at the Friars Club in New York. And I don't know if you know the Friars Club. It's an old show business fraternity.
A memorable lunch. Delicious would be.
Pretty much the only member of that club is Alan Zweibel. He took me there too. Yeah. There's never anybody there.
You didn't see the guy who looks like Robert De Niro at the end of Casino with the who hasn't been out of the Friars Club since 1979 with the cravat and like the cigarette in the holder, like looking at a gambling form?
Well, here's the problem with the Friars Club. When I first joined, it's this old show business fraternity. Started off all show business, all comedians, and now it's been diluted somewhat. I remember, if you know the geography of New York at all, it's on 55th between Madison and Park. And I was walking toward the club one day, and for some reason there was nobody else on the street. The street was sort of empty. Maybe it was a Saturday, I don't remember. And out of this door pops Henny Youngman. Remember him? The king of the one-liners. And he's walking towards the Friars Club. I'm behind him. He doesn't see me. So as far as he's concerned, He's alone. There's nobody else on the street. This is an important part of this story, okay? He walks across the street to go to the Friars Club. He gets to the curb right in front of the club. A pigeon comes down, lands at his feet. He looks at the pigeon and goes, "Any mail for me?" He didn't know I was there. He was talking to a bird, okay? This is my club.
That's quick. That reminds me of one of the funniest things I've ever seen, which was my grandfather, who was no Henny Youngman, but a pretty funny old Jew. And I took him to a restaurant one time. He was in his 90s at the time, and we come back and we're walking to the car. He's walking with a cane at this point, and there's a banana peel in the gutter, and he pokes at it with his cane and then looks at me and goes, "Anti-Semites."
Yeah.
For your book called Go the F to Sleep, how many drafts did you do before? Because my son is having an issue at school where he isn't just being introduced formally to the writing process, and he wrote a story once, and he told his teacher, why do I have to do anything else? And he thought, write one time and done.
Right.
So how many times did you write? That's why I brought him here today.
Well, I better get this right. Well, let me first speak about the importance of editing in general. You listening, Sonny boy? All right. No, editing is crucial. It's half the battle, and in some cases, 3/4 of the battle. And in fact, I have friends, a guy that I grew up with, he and I always both wanted to be writers, and we were both on that path. We both took it really seriously from a young age. We read a lot. We talked about what we read. We showed each other stuff. And I still believe that when he got derailed, and the reason he is not a writer today is because he never had the stomach to really, really edit his work. He would produce a first draft of a novel. It would be hot garbage, like most people's first drafts of a novel. He would send it out to people, get critique. The people critiquing it would confirm that it was a pile of trash. But instead of taking it apart and, disassembling it until everything was just lying on the street and he, could figure out how to reassemble it in a way that would make it work, he would just abandon it and write another first draft of a different project. And I think it's a real rite of passage until you've had to completely reconceptualize a book from the ground up or a history paper, then you're not really a writer. That said, I wrote Go the F to Sleep.
That's what the F stands for. I've been racking my brain.
I wrote it in 35 minutes with no pants on. But many of my less successful books I edited extensively. There was one draft. No, I tweaked it and I edited it. I probably went through several drafts of that book. Even though it's a very short book, verses got taken out. They got reconceptualized. The arc of the book had to be refined. There is, in fact, an arc, believe it or not, to the book. Some of the rhymes weren't as precise as I wanted them to. Some of them didn't scan. No, I looked at it many, many times. Always with no pants on.
Alan, what was your favorite sketch you worked on Saturday Night Live?
Well, I created some of Gilda's characters like Rosanna Dana was fun. Also, I did the Samurais for John Belushi. That was a lot of fun also. It was, thank you. It was such just, doing a live TV, it was such a great training for doing, and it was so much fun because everything I do now, a book, a play, movies, they take, if you're lucky, it takes 2 years for it to exist in the world. And there I would be writing a live show every week. I would go upstairs after dress rehearsal on Saturday nights. There would be an audience at 7:30. A full show is done. Then the audience is let out. We rewrite our sketches. And I'd go upstairs after my new sketch was put on cue cards. And I'd watch the 11 o'clock news. And if there was something hit me, I would write a joke and it would be on TV a half hour later. It was actually 2 times when I was on Saturday Night Live. They were on the air live doing Weekend Update. I was under the desk writing jokes and handing it up. So writing under those situations was a lot of fun. But those 2 things were probably first and foremost because they became, little franchises,
You didn't have a typewriter down there, right? You were just...
No, it was just There no computers back then. It was the IBM Selectrics with the ball thing that went like that. Remember?
Couple more, yeah.
With your book about Franklin and with the Broadway show about Hamilton, do you have any thoughts of other historical figures to have conversations with?
Yeah, Alexander Hamilton, but they took it. No, something, this is the kind of vehicle, because we have the stamp as the magic thing that can go through time, we could conceivably come up with this, but we haven't. Look, we discussed Moses, you know what I mean? I don't know if Moses got mail. I don't know, we'd have to look that up. But,
Moses Got Mail is a great title for something, though.
Yeah. But it's conceivable we could. Henny Youngman's pigeon, yeah.
Yeah.
So I'd like a little bit of hope. Does Vivian sleep?
This is a tough crowd. No, he does. Vivian is 7 now. She sleeps much better. Possibly it was financial insecurity that had her up nights.
The real odd thing is we've been on book tour all week, and he reads that to me in the hotel at night before I go. Yeah, so it's very, very effective. Yeah.
We'll take one more.
Do you remain friends with Billy Crystal, and have you collaborated on any?
Well, we collaborated on 700 Sundays. I don't know if any of you saw that, but it worked really well. And we just finished Labor Day, a screenplay that we wrote together for him to be in. So yeah, he's Uncle Billy to my kids, so
Yeah.
we remain very close.
As somebody who spent a lot of time in a car with Alan over the last week, we can't go anywhere without he and Billy Crystal talking on the phone and giggling like school children. So.
Well, I want to thank them, but first I have just a quick announcement. The Rock Bottom Remainders, which is an all-author rock band, not a good one, will be performing at the Miami Book Fair this year. And I say, if you applaud, you have never heard us. But this year, Alan will be joining us, and Adam has agreed. You're gonna rap, are you not?
I am. I'm going to try to bring you guys into the early 80s.
Which is a stretch for. But there's no chords, right?
No chords.
No, okay. Then we're good.
I'll be the big Jew in the back going, do run, 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 okay? So look for me.
Anyway, thank you, Alan Zweibel, Adam Mansbach.
Thank you.
Yeah.